King Charles is finished. He is completely tired of Camilla, and he is not trying to hide it anymore.
Today, I am proud to create him Prince of Wales. With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground.
Charles has now taken Camilla's crown and given it directly to Catherine. He trusts Catherine more than he has ever trusted Camilla before. And the shocking part is this: Camilla had no idea at all that this was going to happen. When the truth finally came out, she quickly ran to her husband and made one strong request that was so surprising it made the whole royal family stop and go silent. They are still shocked by what she asked for. And what Charles said in return will leave you feeling shaken. The mistake that could not be forgiven. The reason for Charles's anger toward Camilla started a long time ago. It began with a dark driveway. Every night at Highgrove, which is Charles's private country home, his valet, Ken Stronach, followed a set of orders that had nothing to do with helping a future king. He was told to treat Camilla Parker Bowles as the hidden woman of the house while Diana was still Charles's wife. And while the world still believed that the marriage was strong and unbroken, every night after midnight, Charles would walk to his bedroom door and turn off the detailed security alarm so Camilla could walk through the house without setting it off. Every single morning, Stronach was sent into Camilla's guest bedroom to mess up the clean and untouched bed with his own hands, so it looked like she had slept there during the night. The royal protection officers also had their own job to do. They would call ahead to Camilla's house whenever Charles was on his way there. She would then turn off every light in the building so his car could quietly enter her driveway, completely hidden from anyone on the road outside. No one saw him arrive. No one could prove that he was there. Among the people who knew about this, Charles had a nickname. They called him the Prince of Darkness. He felt deeply embarrassed every time he heard that name. But still, he accepted it all for her. This way of secretly visiting each other was not random. It was a carefully planned operation that lasted for years. It involved many members of staff, all working together to protect a secret that was already breaking apart the most watched marriage in the world from the inside. Charles was not just having an affair. He was running a full system. And he ran that system because he had already decided something very important in his heart. He was not willing to lose Camilla again. The palace had separated them years before all of this started. She had been judged as not suitable, and she was quietly married off to Andrew while Charles was away at sea and unable to stop it. During that time apart, there are claims that Charles was completely unhappy. He was drinking heavily during the first few days after they were separated. He wanted to be with her again more than anything. The situation was very messy and emotional. One source said that when Charles finally returned and found out she was gone, he never truly accepted it. Not in the years that came after. Not even during his marriage to Diana. One insider from the palace claims that Charles quickly went to see Camilla on the very same night he returned. He could not wait even one more day. They met at a secret place, and it is said that Charles stayed in Camilla's arms for hours. Diana already knew that the affair had started again. In fact, she had known for a long time. And one evening, at a party near Richmond, she finally decided she would not pretend anymore. She noticed that both Charles and Camilla had quietly left the room. She began walking toward the stairs, and the people around her immediately understood what she was about to do. Some guests stepped in front of her and tried to stop her. They told her clearly, "Diana, don't go down there." But she went down anyway. What she saw at the bottom of those stairs broke her already fragile heart. Charles and Camilla were sitting together in a corner, close and comfortable, inside a house full of people who were all pretending not to see what was happening. Something inside Diana broke open at that moment. According to sources, she reached out and grabbed Camilla by her dress. She pulled her away from Charles with strong force. Camilla did not look scared. She did not look ashamed. Instead, she looked at Diana with a slow and calm smile that showed she believed she had already won. And she knew it. Charles quickly stepped between them. He looked at Diana and said, "You should not be here." Camilla then softly said to him, "Let me speak to her." Charles stepped back, and Camilla turned to face Diana alone. People who were there say Diana was trying very hard to stay strong that night. Her eyes felt like they were burning. She was holding back her tears with all her strength because she refused to let this woman see her break. Then she looked straight into Camilla's face and said the word she had come down those stairs to say. She said, "I know exactly what is happening. I can clearly see that I am in the way, and it must be very difficult for both of you, but I do understand what is going on. Do not treat me like I am foolish." Camilla did not say anything to deny it. She simply looked back at Diana with the same calm and untroubled expression. Diana recorded every single detail of that moment on secret tapes for her biographer, Andrew Morton. Those tapes were later shared with the world after Diana died in 1997. People heard the entire story in Diana's own voice, and they turned against Camilla with a strong anger that lasted for many years. The hate letters sent to magazines were so extreme that Tatler magazine had to call the police. Photographers waited outside Camilla's home every single morning without missing a day. Her son Tom even kept binoculars in the bathroom so the family could look out and count how many photographers were hiding in the bushes before anyone went outside. Charles watched all of this happen to the woman he had chosen. And still, he did not stop. When his sons, William and Harry, came to him before the wedding in 2005 and directly asked him not to marry her, telling him clearly that it would cause more harm than good, he listened to everything they said, sat with them, heard every word, and still married her anyway. That shows how much he had already given up for this woman even before the wedding day arrived. His first marriage, the support of the public, and the approval of his sons. He had paid every price that was asked of him. He had chosen Camilla over everything else. And that is exactly why what she did next broke something inside him that could not be fixed. In January 2023, Prince Harry sat on CBS national television in front of millions of people and directly accused Camilla of sharing private family conversations with British tabloids to improve her own public image. He called her dangerous. He said she had been building connections within the British press, and because of those connections, there would be, in his exact words, people or bodies left in the street. In his book, Spare, he wrote that Camilla had used him as a sacrifice for her own public image. He said that certain stories written about him in British newspapers could only have come from her. Now imagine this situation from Charles's point of view. He had spent years trying to repair his relationship with Harry. Every time he tried to move closer to fixing things, something would appear in the press that made it more difficult, more painful, and almost impossible to handle. Stories that felt like they came from inside the family. Stories that seemed to know details that only people very close to the situation could know. And Harry was standing on American television pointing directly at the woman Charles had chosen over his own sons as the source of those leaks. That is not just a betrayal of Harry. That is a betrayal of everything Charles had given up to protect her. Sources close to the palace say the damage did not end with what Harry was saying in public. It was also growing quietly behind closed doors in ways that were slowly wearing Charles down completely. Charles had one clear goal for his time as king. He wanted to modernize the monarchy and show that it could be efficient, responsible, and still important in the modern world. He spoke about this all the time. He had built his reputation as king around making this happen. But sources say Camilla was slowly becoming a problem for that goal instead of helping him achieve it. While Charles was going through cancer treatment, sometimes too weak to even stand properly in the morning but still continuing with his public duties, sources say Camilla began acting in ways that worried the people closest to him. She started cancelling Charles's official events without telling him. Important meetings that had already been planned, confirmed, and shared with foreign leaders and government officials were quietly cancelled. The people affected by these cancellations were not given any explanation. They were simply met with silence. In the world of international relations and official duties, that kind of silence makes a king look either too sick to do his job or too weak to control his own household. Neither of those possibilities was acceptable. Sources say senior staff inside the palace were watching this happen and felt deeply concerned, because the cancellations were not even the worst part. Camilla was also getting involved in financial decisions that were not part of her role. She was influencing where money was being spent, which projects received funding, which priorities were supported, and which ones quietly disappeared without notice. Charles had built his entire identity as king on responsibility and reform. He had spoken many times about reducing waste and proving that the monarchy deserved every bit of money it received from the country. And now, his wife was making decisions behind the scenes that went directly against everything he stood for. These actions, if they became known to the public, would make him look like a man who could not manage his own institution. It did not take long before Charles finally lost his patience. Sources from the palace say he confronted her directly. He told her clearly that she was crossing a line. He made it very clear that her role had limits, and she was going beyond them in ways he would not accept. What happened next shocked the royal family. Camilla did not show any fear. She looked straight back at him. Her eyes said everything her words did not. They said, "You do not have the right to stand there and tell me what to do." This was a woman who had spent 30 years being judged and criticized by the whole world and had continued forward without stopping. And now the man she had gone through all of that for was standing in front of her, telling her she had gone too far. The way she looked at him made it clear exactly what she thought about that. She believed she had earned her place after giving 30 years of her life for it. She had suffered quietly for it and given everything, and she was not going to be controlled by the one person in the world who fully understood how much it had cost her. Charles felt the impact of that moment. Every word she did not say hurt him even more than the word she spoke. And in that moment, he understood that the woman standing in front of him believed he owed her something he had never agreed to give. At that point, he knew something had to change. He needed to place someone else in a position of control. He had to give her crown to someone else. And he knew he needed to act quickly, very quickly. Charles already had his focus on someone else. Someone who had never made him feel like he owed a debt. Someone the public loved with a deep and powerful feeling that reminded him of something he had not seen since Diana. And that person was Catherine. The woman who was already beginning to replace her. While Harry and Meghan were taking over headlines everywhere with Netflix deals, revealing books, and podcast launches, something very different was happening quietly on the other side of the palace. Catherine was not fighting with anyone. She was not creating problems or making demands or leaking stories to anyone. She was working quietly and steadily, in a way that was slowly building into something no one had expected. Catherine started a project called Shaping Us, which focused on early childhood development. She did not just attach her name to it. She sat in meetings with brain scientists and government officials and spoke about brain development, research, and public policy. She was explaining that what happens to a child in their first 5 years can shape almost everything about the person they become later in life. And she supported her ideas with scientific evidence, pushing those ideas toward real government action. Politicians began to pay attention. Researchers started responding to her and meeting with her. She was getting access to important discussions that royal titles alone usually cannot open. Sources say Charles noticed this. This was not simple charity work for appearances. Catherine was creating real results that were influencing serious conversations inside government offices. She had entered a space where no one expected a princess and made herself someone people truly needed to hear from. A 2025 YouGov survey later showed her public approval rating at 74%. To compare, Camilla has never reached that level, not even once in 30 years of being in the public eye. Then January 2024 came and changed everything. Within hours of each other, the palace announced that Charles had cancer and that Catherine had gone through major abdominal surgery. The entire working system of the senior royal family broke down at the same time. Charles stepped away from public duties. William also stepped back to stay with his wife and their 3 children. That left Camilla in a very visible position for almost 3 months. She became the most seen senior working royal in Britain. She attended events, carried out duties, and represented the monarchy at major occasions. In those 3 months, she did more public work than she had done in most of the previous year. But the world hardly noticed, because people were completely focused on something else. Catherine had not been seen in public since Christmas Day. The palace was sharing very little information about her condition. That silence created a gap, and the internet filled it in a way that shocked many royal watchers. The hashtag #WhereIsKate spread rapidly across social media and stayed there for weeks. People were worried about her. Rumors and conspiracy theories grew in huge numbers. Each day that passed without clear information made the situation worse. Then, on March 22, 2024, Catherine released a video. She was sitting outside, calm and speaking clearly, with her children nearby. She looked directly at the camera and told the world that she had cancer. She explained that she found out after a planned abdominal surgery. She asked for time and privacy while she went through treatment. That video was watched 15 million times within the first 24 hours. World leaders released public messages of support. Flowers began appearing outside Kensington Palace without any planning, without anyone telling people to bring them. It simply happened. People came because they wanted to show they cared. And within 48 hours of that video being released, Camilla faded from public attention again. 3 months of leading the monarchy disappeared in a single news cycle. The world shifted its focus completely and instantly, and there was nothing anyone could do to slow it down. Several trusted news sources made the same comparison within days of Catherine's announcement. They said the public reaction felt like August 1997. That is one of the most powerful and emotional comparisons anyone can make about the British royal family. August 1997 was when Diana died. And the sadness that followed her death was so huge and so intense that it shook the monarchy deeply and almost destroyed its relationship with the British people forever. The writer Tina Brown spent a whole book explaining how every single choice the royal family has made since Diana died has been guided by one very frightening question. Are we about to make the same mistake again? The royal institution failed Diana. It acted cold when it should have shown human feeling. It tried to control everything when it should have been open and honest. It protected itself when it should have protected her. And the public saw all of it and never forgot what happened. Charles saw everything as well. He was inside the system that failed Diana. And he knew exactly what it had cost the monarchy. Now he was watching the British public care about Catherine in the same deep way. Not because of any planned campaign or carefully controlled image, but simply because of who she was. Warm, honest, real, and not afraid to show it. The public trusted her. They were afraid of losing her. They cared about her in a way that cannot be created or bought. Charles made a clear decision. Catherine had shown that she could connect with people in a way Camilla never had and never would. She had proven that she could handle difficult situations with grace, take part in serious policy work, and still make everyday people feel like she truly cared about them. That mix of qualities was exactly what the monarchy needed to survive into the next generation. Camilla could not provide that. The numbers made it obvious, and Charles stopped pretending otherwise. He chose to stand with the public, and the person the public had chosen was Catherine. With this in mind, Charles moved quickly to take action. Camilla felt the change before anyone said anything out loud. Decisions that once passed through her office began going somewhere else. What she did not yet understand was that the decision had already been fully completed. It had been built into the structure of the institution before she even had a chance to stop it. The removal begins. By the spring of 2025, the internal changes inside the British monarchy could no longer stay hidden behind palace walls. Major news organizations were reporting what royal insiders had been seeing for months. A careful and planned shift of power was happening, and it was moving in only one direction, away from Camilla and toward Catherine. People who had spent many years studying and watching the royal family said they found it difficult to explain the pattern as anything other than intentional. Each change on its own could be explained. But when seen together, they told a story that was impossible to misunderstand. The most painful part of this process, the part that hurt the most on a personal level, was what happened to the patronages. In the royal system, a patronage is not just a small activity or a hobby. It is the main job. It is the reason a working royal exists in public at all. When a royal holds a patronage, meaning they officially support and represent a major charity or institution, they are doing the main work expected of them. Patronages in areas like the arts, healthcare, and reading programs form the base of a working royal's public role. They are how a royal proves their value within the system. Several of Camilla's most important patronages were reportedly taken away from her and given to Catherine. These were not new projects. These were efforts she had spent many years building from the ground up, growing them through years of public criticism and developing them with steady personal effort. To truly understand what losing them meant, you have to remember what those patronages meant in Camilla's life. After Diana died in 1997, Camilla could not appear in public without serious safety concerns. The sadness the country felt for Diana had turned into open anger toward her. She spent years living in near isolation, unable to go out without being surrounded by photographers, unable to speak in public without causing another wave of anger. The patronages were how she slowly rebuilt her life. They became the public identity she carefully created over 20 years to replace the one that had been destroyed after Diana's death and the public judgment that followed. Taking those patronages away was like removing everything she had built since the hardest years of her life. And it was done quietly, without any public statement or clear acknowledgement that it was even happening. At the same time, another change was happening, and it may have been even more important. Catherine was being included in discussions and decision-making areas that had once been shared only between Charles and Camilla. This was not simply preparing her for a future role. This was about giving her real responsibility in running the monarchy right now. Sources reported that Catherine had been given greater authority as a Councillor of State. This is the official role given to senior royals who are legally allowed to act on behalf of the monarch when he is not available. Her expanded role reportedly allowed her to receive foreign ambassadors for the Crown and lead certain meetings of the Privy Council. The Privy Council is the official group of senior advisors to the monarch, and leading its meetings is one of the clearest signs of royal power that exists. These are powers that have never usually been given to a Princess of Wales. Catherine was not the Queen. She was not the monarch. And yet she was being given roles that went far beyond anything that position had ever included in the past. Camilla's name was missing from important institutional documents where her involvement would normally be expected as a standard rule. Charles was not simply allowing Catherine to grow in importance. He was actively planning and building it. Sources said he was reviewing her major public speeches before she gave them, opening doors for her inside the institution that would normally take many years of seniority to reach. He was treating her the way a company leader treats the person they have already chosen to take over, putting all available support and resources into the one person they believe can keep the organization strong into the next generation. And here is the detail that shows just how planned and complete this whole process really was. By the time the pattern became clear enough for journalists outside the palace to report on it, it was already finished. The changes had already been put in place. The laws about the councillors of state had already been passed by Parliament, which meant Catherine's increased authority was supported by law, not just by palace decisions. Charles had already made his moves before Camilla had any official chance to respond. Camilla was watching everything happen with almost no way to stop it. She had only one move left, and she used it. The shocking demand. Camilla went directly to Charles and demanded a written guarantee. She wanted something official, something with legal and institutional strength that could not be quietly changed later when it became inconvenient. Specifically, she asked for written protection covering 3 things: her rank, her remaining patronages, and her position protected against any more transfer of power, no matter how public opinion or palace strategy might change. And the reason she asked for those 3 specific protections shows clearly how well she understood what was happening around her. But there was also a 4th level to her request that should not be ignored. Charles is a man in his 70s who has been fighting cancer. His long-term health is uncertain. When Charles eventually dies, William will become king. William, who before his father's wedding in 2005 sat down with his brother and asked their father not to go through with the marriage. William, who has never shown clear warmth toward his stepmother and has never publicly shown any desire to protect her role inside the royal system. Camilla was not only asking for protection from what Charles was doing right now. She was asking for protection from a future without her husband, from a new king who had opposed her from the beginning and who would take the throne without any written rule forcing him to treat her with anything more than basic respect. She had already been hurt badly once by trusting a spoken promise from this institution. The agreement in 2005 had been very clear. She would only be princess consort, never queen. That was the public deal made so the British people would stop openly rejecting the relationship. That agreement lasted only until Charles had enough power to change it on his own. She was not going to trust another unwritten promise. This time, she wanted it written into official rules. No one expected what Charles did next. He looked directly into her eyes and said no. Sources say Camilla's face changed immediately. Her eyes grew wide. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her lips were shaking. Charles told her it was finished. Then he turned around and walked out of the room. Sources say Camilla stood there by herself. Her face turned completely red. Not from anger this time, but from something she had not felt in 30 years of surviving everything this institution had put her through. Fear, and the first feeling of shame. Charles made his decision, and this time he fully committed to it. For many years, he had allowed his emotions to guide his choices. He had chosen Camilla over his sons, over public opinion, and even over his own better judgment, and he had watched the consequences grow worse year after year. Now, that was over. He decided he would do what was best for the monarchy, not what his heart had been telling him since 1970. He knew where the public's trust truly was. He had seen what happened when the institution failed the person the public loved. He had been part of that failure with Diana, and he had carried that burden ever since. He was not going to make the same mistake again. Protecting Catherine's position was now the same as protecting the future of the monarchy. No matter what it cost him personally, he was ready to accept it. Even if what it cost him was